Welcome back, everyone. You know how this works. You send us some fascinating material and we dive right in.
Yeah, and you've given us quite a collection this time.
Really focusing on how we can kind of, navigate the hurdles that life throws at us and create a more positive experience overall.
A lot of it centers around the ideas in this book, the power of positive thinking.
Right. Lots of techniques and stories all about, achieving peace of mind, improving well-being, having more energy, basically living a more joyful and fulfilling life.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The author has a background in writing and radio and giving lectures, and the principles presented have their roots in, I guess you could say, applied Christianity.
So pretty clear vision for us today, then.
Yeah.
We're digging into all of this, pulling out the key concepts, and looking for actionable advice on how we can all cultivate a more resilient and positive mindset.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, let's jump in. So, right off the bat, the power of belief and self-confidence is a big theme.
Yeah, and there's this story about a man in his 40s who was just crippled with feelings of inferiority.
Yeah, years of carrying that weight of self-doubt. And the advice was pretty interesting. There was the longer-term suggestion to sort of analyze where these feelings were coming from. But the immediate step, like the prescription for right now, was to recite Philippians 4.13.
Oh, yeah, the one that goes, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me.
Exactly. And even before, fully understanding why he felt this way, just repeating that affirmation over and over seemed to create a shift.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The power of those positive statements. It's like even if you don't totally believe it at first, the act of saying it can start to change something inside.
And then there's the story of that young guy at work, inventing inside information to try and impress his colleagues.
Oh, yeah, really seeking validation and wanting to feel important. But his employer's reaction was really interesting.
Right. Instead of just reprimanding him, he recognized that there was this need for recognition there, this desire to contribute. So he steered the young man towards some areas within the company where his skills could actually be, valued and lead to real accomplishments.
Recognizing the motivation behind even what might be seen as negative behavior.
Exactly. And redirecting that energy in a positive way.
Yeah.
And this really brings us to that idea of the inferiority complex, which the book really pinpoints as a significant barrier.
Yeah.
And those deep-seated feelings of not being good enough, they can stem from so many things, maybe tough childhood experiences or challenging life circumstances or even just negative self-perceptions that we've kind of internalized over the years.
It's like this invisible wall that holds us back.
Right. And it's not just about academic achievements either. I mean, they make a really interesting point about the difference between excelling in school and what they call achieving the real A's in life. Because you can ace all your classes, but that doesn't automatically translate into overall fulfillment and success in every area of your life. And on the flip side, struggles in one area don't define your potential in others. It's a much broader perspective on what makes a truly successful and meaningful life.
Absolutely.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. They talk about filling your mind with faith as the ultimate key to overcoming the inferiority complex, connecting faith in something greater than yourself with that sense of belief in your own capabilities.
Prayer is a big part of that, too.
Right. Prayer being a way to kind of tap into that strength and that belief.
Yeah.
And there's that great example of the traveling salesman who made it a point to keep Bible verses visible on his dashboard, specifically Matthew 17.20 about faith moving mountains and Romans 8.31 about, having divine support no matter what.
It wasn't just passively hoping for things to get better. It was a deliberate choice to feed his mind with these messages all day, every day.
Right, constantly reinforcing these positive ideas. And it's amazing, he directly attributed positive changes in his business to this change in his mindset.
And then there's the story of the person who felt like they had absolutely nothing left, completely lost everything. But then they started listing their assets, the things they still had. Family, friends, their health, their integrity, their faith.
It's incredible how shifting your focus to what you do have, even in the midst of really difficult circumstances, can change your whole perspective.
It goes against that tendency to just fixate on what's missing and overlook all the good things that are still there.
And the book makes a crucial point about how our default confidence attitude really shapes how we see things. Someone struggling with inferiority will tend to filter everything through that negative lens, whereas cultivating a more balanced and positive outlook allows for a more objective and empowering view. It's not denying the challenges, but approaching them from a place of strength.
Yeah, like instead of immediately assuming you can't do something, you start from the position of, okay, how can I make this work?
Exactly.
It changes everything.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about cultivating peace of mind. There was that story of the man who sought prayer for peace and ended up having that very unusual prayer experience over the phone.
Oh, right, just a simple request and such an unexpected outcome. He just wanted prayer, and somehow, despite the rather unconventional method, he described feeling this deep sense of cleansing, happiness, and peace. It's like he emptied his mind and then peace just kind of flowed in.
It sounds almost like a mental and emotional release, like clearing space for tranquility to enter. And then there's the physician's patient who carried cards with peaceful quotations on them, like that beautiful one from the 16th century mystic. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. Everything passes away except God. God alone is sufficient.
Those words were like anchors, helping him to hold on to a sense of peace amidst the chaos of life. It's like constantly lubricating the mind with these calming thoughts, building resilience against stress and anxiety.
Intentionally feeding your mind with those peaceful messages.
Yeah.
And then there's Bill, who was basically told to read the Bible as medicine for his nerves. And even though he was initially a little secretive about it, he found it really helpful.
It really speaks to the power of engaging with material that promotes peace and hope, even if it's just a few minutes a day.
Absolutely. And the book draws a pretty direct connection between the words we speak and the thoughts we think. If we consciously strive to use peaceful language in our conversations, it can actually help us to cultivate more peaceful thoughts and a calmer state of mind overall.
Right? It's like the way we talk to others influences the way we talk to ourselves.
Exactly. And that, in turn, impacts our inner peace. They also talk about the effects of noise on our subconscious, contrasting it with the restorative power of silence, even recommending the technique of mentally revisiting peaceful scenes to reinforce those positive feelings. The author even paints this really vivid picture of a tranquil scene in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah. It's almost like creating a mental sanctuary, a place you can go back to in your mind to find calm whenever you need it. It's really interesting how he contrasts that with the story of a businessman who was physically present in this beautiful place, but so preoccupied with his worries that he couldn't even appreciate it.
Yeah, a good reminder that peace isn't just about our surroundings, it's a state of mind.
Right.
Now let's talk about harnessing energy and vitality. The book proposes that even simply adopting a more positive mindset can boost our energy levels, by fostering that sense of ample support and available resources.
It's that mind-body connection again.
Mm.
If we feel optimistic and capable, that often translates into greater motivation and energy.
Yeah, and on the flip side, negative thinking can be incredibly draining. They also present this analogy of going to church as a way to recharge batteries.
Oh yeah, seeing a higher power as the source of all energy, both physical and spiritual.
Exactly, tapping into something bigger than ourselves to replenish and renew our own energy. And then they introduce this concept of a highly organized individual who experiences no energy leaks, and their efficiency is attributed to this harmony between their physical body, their mind, and their spirit, all working together in sync.
It's like this continuous, efficient flow of energy preventing those unnecessary depletions.
And they mentioned Mrs. Edison's observation of her husband, Thomas Edison, and how he was able to just deeply relax and fall asleep almost instantly after working for hours on end.
Really highlighting that ability to completely switch off and recharge, which is essential for avoiding burnout and maintaining long-term productivity.
Okay, this one's really interesting. They talk about synchronizing our personal speed with the movement of God to find a natural rhythm and flow. It's contrasting the frantic pace of most people with what they describe as God's more deliberate and effective rhythm.
Oh yeah, it's like that saying, slow and steady wins the race.
Right. It's not about being idle, but finding that sweet spot where we're not constantly rushing and depleting our energy. They even give the analogy of an industrialist who noticed that his best workers were the ones who kind of harmonized with the rhythm of their machines, finding that natural flow.
Makes sense.
And they bring in the perspective of a football coach who believed that emotional control, and he specifically rooted that in spirituality, was absolutely crucial for his players to have sufficient energy. He actually said he wouldn't have a player on his team who hated another player.
Wow, he really recognized how much energy negative emotions can drain, especially hatred and resentment. It's like they consume our vital resources.
Exactly. And then there's that really powerful case of a man who had a nervous breakdown, and it was attributed to all these pent-up psychological stressors. It was like they were literally blocking his energy flow.
Yeah, and the intervention involved him intentionally recalling positive memories. And his return to that natural energy flow was described as an act of faith.
It really underscores how much our psychological and emotional state can impact our physical and mental energy levels.
Yeah, it's all connected.
And that person who was carrying the heavy weight of guilt, once they addressed the situation, sought forgiveness, they experienced this release, a lifting of that double weight, and a surge of renewed energy.
Guilt is a powerful thing, isn't it? It can weigh us down so much.
Absolutely. And the advice given to the mentally exhausted professor was so interesting, incorporating outdoor activities, Bible reading, and even memorizing scripture just to saturate his mind with those positive words and ideas.
And a multi-pronged approach, isn't it? Physical activity, mental stimulation, and spiritual nourishment.
Yeah, really addressing that exhaustion on all levels.
Yeah. Now let's dive into this concept of prayer power. It's presented not just as a spiritual practice, but as a practical tool for problem solving. And they talk about Jack Smith, the health club operator, who believed in this strong connection between spiritual and physical well-being.
Yeah, the idea that prayer can actually provide practical guidance and comfort. And of course, Jack Smith's perspective really emphasizes the importance of taking care of both our physical and spiritual selves.
Absolutely. And they really drive home the point that getting older doesn't have to mean a decline in energy or spirit. Prayer is presented as a way to actually renew and find guidance as we age.
I love that perspective. Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I'm getting older, I'm supposed to slow down. But why not maintain that vibrancy?
Right. Why not?
Yeah.
They introduced this really interesting 3-step formula for prayer. Prayerize, picturize, and actualize.
Yeah, it's really about making prayer an active practice, a conversation. Prayerize being that daily habit of creative prayer, just talking openly and honestly about everything. Yeah, and then picturize involves creating this clear mental image of the desired outcome, really envisioning success.
Right. And then actualize is about actually putting in the effort to make that vision a reality.
Taking action, yeah. They even share the story of that wife who just calmly and consistently pictured her estranged husband returning home, and eventually he did.
It's amazing how powerful visualization can be.
Yeah. They also mention the idea session technique used by those 4 executives, incorporating silent prayer and meditation.
Bringing those practices into the professional world, seeing the potential for enhanced creativity and problem solving.
And then there's that idea of praying for audiences,
Yeah.
sending out those thoughts of love and goodwill, even to people who seem negative or antagonistic.
Yeah, it's like setting up positive energy into the world. And honestly, it can't hurt, right?
Right, exactly. And then we meet this elderly man who had this really simple philosophy. He chose happiness every morning.
Wow, starting each day with that intention. That's powerful.
Yeah, really taking ownership of your emotional state.
Mm.
And the story about the lawyer whose wife seemed to, manufacture unhappiness is such a good reminder that so much of our suffering is self-created.
Oh, it's so true, isn't it? Those negative thoughts and attitudes, the fear, the worry, the resentment, they really hold us back.
They really do. And the book offers a pretty straightforward formula for ending unhappiness. Consciously ejecting those negative thoughts and actively replacing them with happy ones. They recommended this morning practice of just sitting down and deliberately focusing on happy thoughts, picturing positive experiences for the day, and repeating the affirmation from Psalm 118.24, "This is the day which the Lord hath made. I will rejoice and be glad in it."
It's like setting the tone for the day,
Yeah.
filling your mind with positivity before you even step out the door.
Yeah. And they provide all these examples of positive self-talk you can use throughout the day. Oh, and there's that great story about Ralston Young, who was inspired to cheer up this unhappy woman simply by complimenting her hat.
Simple acts of kindness. You never know how much they can impact someone's day.
Right. And that description of the red cap who radiated love and happiness, it really illustrates that principle that practicing love creates happiness. They even quote Tolstoy, "Where love is, God is."
So beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. And the book even talks about people becoming inoculated with happiness, like this deep inner transformation.
It's that lasting happiness that comes from a real shift in perspective and belief.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that story about the unexpected party where everyone was just joyfully talking about God and their revitalized sense of spiritual power.
Right, like this collective experience of joy and renewed energy. Ultimately, this section concludes with the idea that true, lasting happiness comes from this inner transformation, changing yourself from the inside out.
Yeah, it's not about waiting for external circumstances to change.
Exactly. They even end with the story of this deeply pessimistic businessman and that bold suggestion to seek help through a connection with God.
Okay, so let's move on to the idea of slowing down and finding a more natural rhythm in life.
Mm.
The book really emphasizes the frenetic pace of modern life and how detrimental it can be to our well-being.
Right. Always on the go, always rushing. It's like we've forgotten how to just be still.
Hmm.
They actually point out that even when we're not physically active, our minds are often racing a mile a minute.
Always thinking, always planning, always worrying.
Exactly. And it's like we've lost touch with that natural peace and stillness that the world offers. There's that great contrasting experience where the author and his wife find this healing quiet in the woods, only to have it shattered by, get this, jitterbug music blaring from a nearby group of young people.
It's such a stark contrast, that natural serenity versus that, almost frantic energy of modern life.
Yeah. And they describe this calming scene, a lake reflecting the colors of autumn, and then they share that quote from Lao Tzu, "Muddied water, let stand, will become clear."
Such a beautiful analogy. Just
Yeah.
like that still water reflecting the beauty around it, our minds can find clarity when we allow ourselves to slow down and be still.
Right. And then there's that doctor who advised this super driven businessman to consciously slow down, delegate tasks, and make time for peace. And guess what? He ended up being more productive and his organization thrived.
It really challenges the idea that constant busyness equals success.
Yeah. Sometimes slowing down is actually the most productive thing you can do. And there's that sweet story about the high-strung manufacturer who learned a valuable lesson from observing a bird's slow and easy morning routine.
Watching the bird just taking its time, enjoying the morning, singing its song. And he realized, hey, maybe I need a little more of that in my life.
Right. Maybe we all do. The author also shares his own experience of having a super rushed day and then making the conscious decision to just stop, rest, and pray for 15 minutes. And it brought back this incredible sense of peace and control. He actually felt a tangible presence, almost like a physician with the healing touch.
Just taking a few minutes to reconnect with that inner stillness, it can make such a difference.
Absolutely. The book notes that more and more people are finding calm and peace through faith and Christian principles. And there's that really interesting story about a meeting that was getting really heated, and one person just deliberately slowed down his speech, almost to a whisper, and it completely diffused the tension.
That's brilliant. By controlling his physical response, his pace of speech, he actually changed the whole energy of the situation.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that our physical actions can directly impact our emotional state. And they suggest that we actually practice being more, phlegmatic, even slightly sluggish, just to avoid those emotional outbursts.
Interesting.
Now let's talk about the power of expectation and faith. We hear the story of this man who struggled with expecting the worst, but he managed to overcome that by consistently practicing Mark 9.23. If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth.
What's so powerful about his story is that he acknowledged that his mind was just wired for negative thinking. He had to actively retrain himself to adopt a more optimistic outlook, to cultivate faith in a higher power and in himself.
Yeah. And the book suggests that shifting our mental habits from disbelief to belief, from expecting the worst to expecting the best, can open up a world of possibilities. There's even that story about Hugh Fullerton and that baseball team. They had all the talent, but they kept underperforming.
Right, because they didn't believe in their ability to win.
Exactly. Their lack of faith became a self-imposed limitation, holding them back.
That's fascinating, isn't it? The power of belief.
Yeah, it's huge. And the book recommends intentionally immersing yourself in those powerful statements of faith, memorizing them, letting them sink into your subconscious as a way to kind of reprogram your thought patterns. They specifically mention verses like Mark 9.23, Matthew 17.20, and Matthew 9.29.
Like positive affirmations for the soul.
Right. And they have this great line, throw your heart over the bar and your body will follow. Heart symbolizing our creative desires and the need to really firmly plant those desires in our subconscious with unwavering faith.
I love that image. It's like once those desires take root deep inside, fueled by faith, our whole being aligns to make them a reality.
And then there's this really interesting anecdote about the woman who wanted to find a husband, and the advice she received was so unexpected, focusing on cultivating this inner attitude of spiritual joy as the key to radiating charm and loveliness.
Yeah, the idea that true attractiveness comes from within, that inner radiance. They even have this cute little saying, God runs a beauty parlor.
Right, like true beauty comes from that inner transformation.
Exactly.
And they emphasize the importance of having a clear goal and a good understanding understanding of your own strengths and abilities. Contrasted with that story of the guy who just aimlessly wanted to go somewhere else without any real self-reflection or specific aims.
Yeah, it's like wandering around in the dark. You need a clear destination and a map to get there.
Right, a clear vision and a plan of action. They talk about approaching our work and our goals with a sense of assurance and expecting success, saying that this magnetizes conditions and attracts creative energies. They even use the example of a woman with no sales experience who just adopted this super positive attitude and a deep sense of faith.
Oh yeah, she went into it thinking, if God be for me, who can be against me?
Yeah.
And she ended up being incredibly successful.
Yeah, and they stress the point that faith really can overcome any obstacle, but it's about being specific. Not just generally wishing for good things to happen, but focusing your faith and energy on one specific challenge at a time.
Like that biblical instruction, you shall say to this mountain.
Exactly. And then there's that successful businessman who leads this huge manufacturing plant, a Christian who actually keeps religious literature in his office. He decided to test the power of positive expectation.
Really put it to the test.
Yeah. And he found that consistently expecting the best outcome actually created the conditions for those results to happen.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the power of our expectations can shape reality.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
Okay.
They contrast this with the obstacle man, the person who's constantly focused on all the things that could go wrong, versus the man of action who just focuses on removing those obstacles.
Right. One is stuck in fear and negativity. The other is moving forward, taking action.
And then there's that story of the wallet with Philippians 4.13 tucked inside as this kind of personal formula for overcoming challenges by accessing inner strength.
It's like a little reminder, a tangible symbol of that belief.
They also share the example of a tennis champion who stayed mentally and spiritually strong even when the game was going against him, highlighting how faith can provide that staying power, that resilience.
Right, that ability to keep going even when things get tough. And then there's that speaker who inspires people to see obstacles not as roadblocks, but as assets.
It's such a powerful shift in perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they share this wise saying attributed to, I think, a black man about overcoming trouble. He said you can go around it, under it, over it, or just plow right through it.
Love that. So many options.
Right. And then they talk about how our subconscious mind can sometimes be like a liar, just constantly reflecting those negative attitudes back at us. So we really have to consciously assert those positive beliefs to counteract that.
It's like we have to reprogram our minds for positivity.
Exactly. They even talk about the cumulative negative impact of those little offhand negative comments and thoughts, and the importance of intentionally replacing them with positive affirmations.
It's about being mindful of our language, both internally and externally.
Right. And they suggest that even those huge, long-standing difficulties can be overcome by just firmly believing that they are removable, even if that initial positive thought is just a tiny flicker.
Holding on to that hope, that belief in the possibility of change.
There's that great golf anecdote where the instructor says, the rough is only mental. Those obstacles often seem so much bigger in our minds than they actually are.
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
Totally. And then there's Jefferson's rule, always take hold of things by the smooth handle.
Which basically means find the path of least resistance, the most positive and skillful approach.
Exactly. And they tell the story of this young boy who struggled with memory, and he received this advice to pray before studying, relax his mind, imagine himself reading a story, and just trust his intelligence.
Trusting his ability to learn. Focusing on his own progress rather than comparing himself to others.
Right. And then we encounter this incredibly inspiring salesman's prayer passed down from his father. I believe I am always divinely guided. I believe I will always take the right turn of the road. I believe God will always make a way where there is no way.
Such a powerful words, full of faith and trust.
Yeah. And that little trick the small business owner used, the one where he had that big wastebasket labeled trouble, and he'd write down his worries and just toss them in there.
Oh yeah, physically letting go of those worries, symbolically handing them over to a higher power.
Now let's get into overcoming worry and anxiety. The book outlines some pretty serious consequences of chronic worry, physical things like high blood pressure, heart disease, ulcers, even rheumatoid arthritis.
And of course, the mental and emotional toll is huge.
Right, not to mention the impact on lifespan and overall sense of security. They even quote a doctor who observed that there's this widespread epidemic of fear and worry.
It's like a pervasive anxiety in our society.
And the first step they suggest in breaking the worry habit is to consciously empty your mind of all that anxiety and fear. They recommend visualizing it and using affirmations like, with God's help, I am now emptying my mind of all anxiety, all fear, all sense of insecurity.
Intentionally clearing out that negativity, making space for peace.
Yeah, and they suggest visualizing yourself, removing those worries one by one, and emphasizing the simplicity of this practice, just clearing out the fear and filling your mind with faith.
Resetting your mental state.
They even caution against dwelling on those fears for too long, saying that it can actually help bring those things to pass.
Yeah, that's self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're constantly focusing on the negative, you might inadvertently create those very outcomes.
And they share the story of a guy who decided to schedule a specific worry day, but when he actually sat down to worry, he couldn't do it.
It's funny, isn't it? Worry is this irrational thing that often defies logic.
Yeah, it does. So his approach to dealing with worry then became spending 15 minutes every morning intentionally filling his mind with thoughts of God.
Actively cultivating those positive thoughts.
They describe worry as essentially filling your mind with thoughts that contradict God's love and care. And the antidote is to fill it with thoughts of God's power, protection, and goodness.
It's about shifting your focus from fear to faith.
Exactly. And they reiterate this point that often these complex problems can be addressed with really simple techniques, like that businessman who developed this little ritual. He'd write down his worries on slips of paper and then toss them into this wastebasket labeled, "Things I Gave to God."
Oh yeah, that symbolic act of release, entrusting those worries to a higher power.
And finally, they offer this concise formula for breaking the worry habit. Recognize that worry is a bad habit that can be changed with God's help. Practice the opposite habit of faith. Affirm, "I believe," 3 times each morning, and place your day and life in God's hands through prayer.
A simple, actionable plan.
So now let's talk about the power of partnership with a higher power. They share the story of Bill, who was passed over for a promotion, and his wife was, well, understandably angry. But Bill had this very different, very calm response.
Really interesting contrast, right? 2 different ways of processing disappointment.
The advice given to Bill was to avoid that anger and resentment, to seek divine guidance through quiet time and prayer. They even reference Matthew 18:20, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them.
That sense of support and guidance from a higher power, especially when going through tough times.
And then they share this story of a really successful businessman who was facing overwhelming problems, and he decided to essentially take God as a partner. He made this heartfelt prayer, surrendering his control and asking for guidance. And he describes this immediate feeling of peace and clarity.
It's like that weight was lifted, and he could see the path forward more clearly.
Yeah, and they really emphasize the effectiveness of this divine human relationship in problem solving.
That we're not meant to do it all alone.
Right. They then introduce this idea of tremendous technique and practicing those faith attitudes, really understanding that genuine faith can overcome any difficulty. And they share the story of Maurice and Mary Alice Flint, who are facing just these huge personal and financial challenges.
A real test of faith.
The advice they were given was to straighten out mentally, align their thinking with God's, and really utilize your faith.
Yeah, it's about shifting your perspective, getting in sync with that higher power.
And this led to Maurice having this idea to carry a mustard seed as a tangible reminder of faith, referencing Matthew 17:20. And that tiny little seed then led to the creation of the mustard seed remembrancer business.
It's amazing how something so small can spark such a significant change.
Right, like a tangible symbol of faith leading to this unexpected success. Now let's talk about faith and healing. The book advocates for a balanced approach, combining faith with good old-fashioned medical science.
It's not about throwing out medicine altogether, but recognizing that faith can play a role alongside medical treatment.
And they share the story of a man with a bone tumor who felt this sense of healing after praying and experiencing this profound sense of Jesus' presence. They also touch on the history of religion in healing, the cure of souls, and how in modern times we've kind of separated spirituality from science.
But they're really interconnected, aren't they?
They are. And they introduce this doctor who noticed that a lot of his patients seemed to need better thought patterns and spiritual guidance more than they needed medicine.
Treating the whole person, not just the physical symptoms.
Exactly. And another doctor shares this letter where he estimates that a huge chunk of illnesses in his town were due to mental and spiritual imbalances, leading him to prescribe books on positive thinking and religious philosophy.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and they share the story of this tense business executive who found relief by practicing Christian principles from a book. And then a doctor recounts her sister's miraculous recovery from a critical illness after prayer. And the man who was healed of a heart condition through a combination of prayer, faith, and gradually returning to activity.
All these different examples of the potential for healing when faith and medical treatment work together.
They outline a 3-point formula for his healing: medical care, faith, and stimulating those spiritual powers.
Yeah, it's a holistic approach.
And they emphasize that God created the natural processes for health in both body and mind, and they offer these really practical steps for dealing with illness: remaining calm, trusting God and the doctor, creating spiritual harmony within the family, visualizing wellness, and ultimately surrendering the situation to God.
It's about surrendering that sense of control and trusting that everything will work out for the best.
Yeah. And then there's the story of the sales manager whose declining health was actually restored through spiritual and emotional